Hey everyone, ready for another deep dive? Today we're tackling the 2024 U.S. presidential election. It's Trump versus Harris, and things are getting really interesting.
Oh yeah, super tight race.
So we've got three great sources to help us break it all down. There's this article from NDTV. It's called Donald Trump versus Kamala Harris, who has lead days before U.S. polls. And we've got one from Forbes, Trump vs. Harris 2024 polls. Trump up in two new surveys. Harris leads in two others.
Oh, and this one from Politico is fascinating.
Oh, yeah, I saw that one. Really makes you think.
It's called New Poll. Trump is getting record levels of support among young Black and Latino men. Live updates, Politico. And get this, millions of Americans have already voted. Early voting is in full swing, so yeah, things are getting real.
It's crazy to think that every single vote could really make the difference.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So let's jump right into it. Those polls from NDTV and Forbes, they're showing us a race that's basically a dead heat.
Yeah, it's either a tie or someone's ahead, but just barely, like within the margin of error.
Okay, so the margin of error.
Can you break that down for us? Why is that so important, especially in a race this close?
Well, it basically means there's a little bit of wiggle room in the results. Like, the race is so tight that even a small change in how people are feeling could completely flip things around.
So even a few percentage points could change who's winning.
Exactly. That's why we're seeing these polls go back and forth all the time.
It's enough to give you whiplash. But remember, it's not just about who's ahead in the popular vote.
Right. Got to think about the Electoral College.
Exactly. That's where it all goes down.
It's all about strategy.
Okay, so quick reminder for everyone. What's the deal with the Electoral College? Why are swing states so important?
So instead of just counting all the votes across the country, the U.S. uses this system where winning certain states gives you way more power.
So it's like some states are worth more points than others?
Kind of, yeah. It's all about winning the right combination of states to get enough electoral votes.
Got it. So which states are we watching this time around? Which ones could decide the whole thing?
The big ones are Michigan, Nevada, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Georgia, and Arizona.
Those are the battleground states, right? Where
Right.
both campaigns are fighting the hardest.
Exactly. Those are the ones to watch.
And what's the situation in those states? Are they as close as the national polls?
Pretty much, yeah. It's like a mirror image. Most of them are showing less than a 1-point difference between Trump and Harris. Like in Nevada, for example, it's basically a tie. But Harris is having a tough time holding on to the Latino vote there, which usually goes Democrat.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. And speaking of things that are kind of surprising, that Politico article, the one about Trump gaining support with young Black and Latino men,
Yeah, that was a bit of a shocker.
that's a group that's historically voted Democrat. So what's going on there?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's a really interesting development, and it just shows how complex voter motivations are.
Yeah, we'll have to dig into that a bit more. But if that trend keeps going, it could definitely have a big impact, especially in those close swing states.
It's a reminder that we need to understand not just who's ahead in the polls, but why.
Okay, so we've got a super tight race, swing states that could go either way, and some pretty surprising voter trends emerging. A lot to think about. But before we move on, let's take a minute to think about this from your perspective, the listener.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost in all the numbers and data, but we want to make sure you understand what all this means for you and how you can make sense of it all.
Exactly. So stick with us. We'll be right back to break it all down and help you navigate this wild election. Okay, so we've got the lay of the land, a tight race, swing states are key, and some surprising voter trends popping up. But let's go deeper. What are the big issues driving people's votes this time around?
Well, that NDTV article pointed out something pretty interesting. A lot of voters seem to be drawn to Trump's policies, particularly on the economy and immigration.
So are we seeing this consistently across different polls?
Mhm.
Or is that just one article's take?
It's definitely a pattern. It seems like even some voters who might not love Trump's personality, his style, they might still agree with him on things like the economy or immigration.
So it's almost like they're weighing different things about each candidate
Exactly, like making a pros and cons list in their heads.
and trying to figure out who lines up with what's most important to them.
Exactly.
So we really need to understand these key issues if we want to make sense of those poll numbers and ultimately figure out who might win.
Absolutely. And speaking of key issues, that Forbes article mentioned something else that's interesting. Harris is struggling to keep the Latino vote in Nevada. And Nevada, remember, that's a key swing state.
Right.
So the Latino vote there, that could be a deciding factor. Now, why is that happening? It could be the economy, maybe concerns about immigration policies, more to unpack there.
It's like each candidate has their strengths, their weaknesses, And it all comes down to which issues resonate most with voters in those swing states.
Right.
So what else should we be looking out for in these final weeks? What could really shake things up?
Well, always keep an eye out for those big campaign moments, things that really grab attention and get people talking, like a big endorsement from someone famous or a major gaffe during a debate, or even something happening internationally that suddenly becomes an election issue.
Oh yeah, those October surprises.
Exactly. They can totally change the direction of the race.
Speaking of surprises, let's circle back to that Politico article.
Hmm?
The one about Trump gaining support with young Black and Latino men.
Yeah.
How do you think that might play out on Election Day? Could that really be a decisive factor?
Hard to say for sure, but if that trend continues, it could definitely have an impact, especially in states with large populations of those demographics. Think about Florida, for example. If the race is really tight there, a shift like that could make all the difference.
It's a good reminder that demographics aren't one big block.
Right.
There's a lot of diversity within any group, so understanding those nuances is really important.
Totally. People's reasons for voting are complex. It's not just about party or ideology.
So as we head into the final stretch of this election roller coaster, what's your expert take on what we can expect?
Well, one word, unpredictable. Polls are tight, swing states are up for grabs, and there's always the chance of something completely unexpected happening. That's what makes it so exciting, though, right?
For sure.
It's a reminder that every vote matters, and we won't know the outcome for sure until all the votes are counted.
Buckle up, everyone. This is going to be a wild ride to the finish line.
It really shows you how dynamic American democracy is. No matter what happens, it's going to be a historic election.
Any final words of wisdom for our listeners as we head into these last few days? How should they be thinking about this election?
Stay informed, be critical of what you're seeing and hearing, and most importantly, get out there and vote. Your voice matters, and in a race this close, every single vote could make a difference.
Couldn't have said it better myself. We'll be back in a flash for the final part of our deep dive into the 2024 election. So stay tuned. And we're back for the final part of our 2024 election deep dive.
It's been quite a ride.
It has. From polls to swing states to surprising voter trends. And guess what? Election Day is almost here. Just a few days away.
Crazy, right?
I know, millions have already voted, but so many votes are still up for grabs.
Yeah, these next few days are gonna be intense.
Every rally, every ad, every tweet could make a difference.
For sure, every little thing counts at this point.
You know, going through these articles with you, I can't help but feel like this election is different.
Different how?
Like, there's this sense of urgency, like we're at a real turning point.
I agree, the stakes are high.
Higher than usual.
Yeah, I think so. Not just for the candidates, but for the whole country.
And the world, right.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. The world is watching.
Everyone wants to see what happens here. So for our listeners who've been with us through this whole thing, what's the one big takeaway you want them to remember?
Honestly, it's simple. Every vote matters. Don't underestimate the power of your vote.
So true. Your vote is your voice. And in a race this close, every voice counts. Okay, last question just for fun. Given how unpredictable this race has been, what's the biggest surprise that could still happen? What could really shake things up at the last minute?
That's a tough one. But you know what? I think the biggest surprise would be a third-party candidate coming out of nowhere and totally disrupting the race.
Like someone we haven't even been talking about.
Exactly. It's not impossible, especially with so many voters feeling disillusioned with the two main parties.
Wow, that would be a game changer.
It would. It would force everyone to rethink
The
everything.
whole political landscape, the whole election.
Totally.
Wow, so much to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the 2024 election.
It's been a pleasure.
Remember, stay curious, stay informed, and most